Hello again, I'm Matthew from thewetpen.com, and after Nagoya, I spent about 4 days in Osaka. Like Tokyo, Osaka has lots of great pen shops within a short walking distance from the main train stations. And on the day that I arrived, I started with the Honkyo department store, which is just across the street. Honkyo has a nice big stationery section with all manner of Japanese and European pens. And of course, they had all of the Pilot Iroshizuku inks. But here, they had them in these color-coordinated testing pens, which was great. Frankly, I wanted to stuff all of these pens into my backpack. But on the back wall, among the other Sailor inks, I found what I was looking for. 4 bottles of store-exclusive Sailor inks, and in the vase bottles, no less. They had a maroon, a bright green, a violet, and a chestnut brown. I grabbed all of them except for the light green, but after feeling how heavy they were and remembering my luggage situation, I decided to put back the brown, although now I wish that I hadn't. So I ended up with maroon and sumire, which means violet. Let me show you what these look like, starting with the maroon. I'm using the same papers for testing as the previous videos. My coloring, plain white rhodia, Iroful, which is a slightly warm-toned Japanese paper, and Midori, which is ivory. And I have to say, I really like this color. It's nice and dark, smooth writing, and not too brown. On the coloring, I got some green sheen, but I like the ink even better on the non-sheening rhodia this time. On the Iroful, the sheen is really shiny, but not as widespread. This is probably the best of both worlds. And on the Midori, the color is almost entirely obscured by the heavy green sheen. And here is the violet. And this is actually a really nice color too. It's basically a blue-purple, but it's blue enough that it almost looks like a royal blue. The color is very consistent across all 4 of my test papers, and there's no real sheen to speak of, but along the edges of the heaviest pooling, there's a little bit of a silvery gray sheen, which is similar to what we see on inks like Diamine Sapphire. After Honkyo, I walked up the street a bit to this building, which is shared by Amaro Zen Bookstore, and more importantly for me, on the second floor is the Nagasawa pen shop. Nagasawa is home to all of the 80 or so standard Kobe inks, and they had all of them in stock. But then they also had a bunch of limited edition inks and collaborative inks, including inks from other brands, some of which were completely new to me. These Now and Then inks are Tono and Limbs, and there's this whole range of Tono and Limbs inks in a variety of exotic hardwood brown colors that are a collaboration with this woodworking shop. But there were just too many choices and I didn't know anything about most of them, so I decided that I'd better do some looking around online and come back in a few days. But somehow I got busy with other things and I never made it back. A couple of days later, though, I did decide to visit a shop to the south of the station in this unassuming building near the Osaka Designers College. Inside is the oddly named Giftionary Delta, and almost as soon as you walk through the entrance, you're confronted by a wall of Tono and Lim's inks. About 400 or 500 of them, from all of the different standard Tono and Lim's lines of ink, with even more around the corner on the end cap. And they had these outrageously priced 8,500 yen bottles of Tono and Lim's squared inks in a locked case. They had all of the Sailor Studio inks, but if you walk past all of that stuff towards the cashier, you'll find a shelf dedicated to exclusive and limited edition inks. They had these 4 Sailor exclusives, a dark magenta, a dark blue, a yellow that was sold out, and a teal. And then they had all of these Tono and Lim's exclusive inks too, named after local attractions. Osaka Castle, Osaka Bayside, and they had some exclusive music-themed inks. These two, Ambitious and Passion, are also Sailor inks, but I don't know anything about them. And these, Lucifer and Daybreak, are also Sailor inks, and I tested them out, but I couldn't decide on one, so I decided to give it some thought and come back later, which was a bad idea. However, I did get a couple bottles of ink, including this mercifully small bottle of Umeda Night Blue. So let's see what it looks like. Okay, this is a rich, deep blue, pretty saturated, and it looks a little purple here and there. It's a really beautiful dark blue on these Western papers, and there's just a bit of green sheen on the 2 Japanese papers, but it's heavier on the Midori. I'm not sure if this will be heavy enough to show up when I write with it. It actually is, but it's hard to see in these samples. The day before visiting Giftionary Delta, we had hiked out to the Mino Park waterfall, and even though the trees were still mostly bare, there were plenty of red bridges and things around, so I broke my rule and I bought the Tono and Lim's Mino Maple Red too. Let's take a look. As this dries, we can see that it's a tomato red, kind of a dirty orange red, with no sheen, but there is some potential for shading, it looks like. And we do see some shading here in the writing sample. Well, after visiting Giftionary Delta, we found our way down to Osaka Castle, which was stunning. And just after sunset on the way back to our hotel, we stopped in at the Marita fountain pen shop. Marita is densely packed with wonderful pens, but not a ton of ink, so I almost missed these. 2 exclusive Sailor inks in vase bottles, and there were only a few left. One of them is wine red, and one of them is green. And I decided to get the green since I had just purchased a maroon. But I don't read Japanese, and when I got back to my hotel room, I discovered that I had picked up the wine red instead. So let's see what it looks like. Okay, this one is not as dark or saturated as the maroon. It's a little more red-pink when it's thin. On the coloring, it's a bit warmer, and on the Iroful, it's cooler, and there's a little bit of green sheen on both of the Japanese papers. In the writing samples, I thought that it gave me some really pretty shading. On my final day in Osaka, I took the train to Nambe Station on the south side of the city. The station is connected to a big shopping center, and in that center is Pele Pena. They had a nice collection of glass pens and inkwells, and lots of European inks, but also these. 14 different sailor-exclusive inks in vase bottles. And there had been even more that were sold out. The young woman who was working there was amazing. Very friendly and helpful, despite the language barrier. She showed me the swatch books of all of the inks, but she had very definite ideas about which inks I should buy. But her colors of choice were too pale for my taste. My first choices were sold out, so I ended up with the Amalfi Azzurro and Assisi Verde. Let's take a look. This Amalfi Blue is a pretty common color, but it's still one of my favorites. It's a vibrant medium blue leaning a little green with some magenta sheen. The magenta sheen didn't show up in this writing sample since my pen was a little bit dry, but I imagine that it would with a wetter feed. And now the Assisi Green. Ooh, this is a rich, velvety smooth dark green. Almost black on this first swatch. It dries down to a dark forest green, and interestingly, it doesn't really sheen. I'd expect some purple or red sheen with this color, but there's just a bit of black sheen on the Japanese papers. After Pele Pena, I headed out to get a quick bite to eat and to explore the neighborhood a little bit, and I was a bit surprised to find sumo wrestlers strolling around. It turned out that they were coming from a nearby arena, and when they had finished with their matches, most of them just wandered out to take the train home. Which shouldn't be surprising, I guess, but for some reason it was. And after walking around a bit more, I also took the train back to my hotel to pack up again and head up to Kyoto for the final 5 days of my trip. Kyoto was gorgeous and not nearly as overwhelming when it came to ink choices, but I'll get into those details in the next and final video of this series. If you want to see that and you're not already subscribed, this is a good time to do it. I've been busy with other projects recently, but I should be getting back on track soon, and I also have some awesome new pens to show you too. And that's it. Enjoy your pens and inks out there, everyone, and I'll see you next time.